Are you wondering if God is in your story? Well, let's go into that. God was in the story for Mary, but she had to go through the ridicule of getting pregnant before marriage, and in that time, that was not anything tolerable. Secondly, she had to go through the stress of traveling all the way to Bethlehem for a census when she was close to putting to bed. And trust me, that was definitely not comfortable for her because there were no such things as cars, planes in those days, right? But she went through it anyway because the prophecy had to be fulfilled that he was born in Bethlehem. Then she went also through the rigor. Her and her husband, Joseph, went through the rigor of escaping to Egypt when their son was just 2 years old, just to preserve his life. God was in their story, and they went through all that. God was in the story for Zachariah and Elizabeth, but they went through the rigor of staying without the child for years because they had to give birth to the forerunner of Jesus Christ, which was John, and he had to be the womb opener, just as Jesus was the womb opener. Elizabeth went through the rigor of being called barren. She went through all the stress and all the mental strain of not having a child, even in her old age. Zachariah went through the stress and through the mental strain of him being a priest, interceding for the people, and yet he couldn't get a child from God. He couldn't receive a child from God. He went through all that. God was in the story for David, and yet David was moving from one cave to another, one hideout to another, just so that he could save his life from the hands of Saul. God was in the story for him. God was also in the story for Sarah, and she had to stay barren for so many years. God's promises were still there, and it happened eventually. The message here is that the fact that God is in the story does not mean that it's all going to be rosy. It does not mean that the way is going to be so broad and so easy for you, okay? There are things that you will go through that will make it look like you are all alone, but trust me, you're not. It's with you. But the beautiful thing is that the end of the story will give the evidence that God was in the story. The end is always glorious and beautiful if you stay with him through the journey, if you go by his leading, if you stay in alignment with him all through the journey. Maybe you got discouraged, but you encouraged yourself to go on with him. The end will be glorious. We have all seen these persons, okay? The end for each and every one of them was glorious. It all made sense at the end, right? If you see the life of all these people, they were people that kept communication with God. So because of that communication that they kept with God, they were able to be led per time and per season, and they were able to find encouragement in those encounters that they had in God. All right. So now, in as much as you are hoping on God and you are waiting on God and just trusting in the fact that he's with you and he's in your story, don't neglect him. Don't neglect the place of fellowship, because that is where you are going to get instructions and leadings, and be sure that you are actually in alignment. So you don't just sit down waiting and hoping when it is actually time for you to move or stop or one thing or the other that God will want you to do per time and per season. So ensure that your relationship with him is strong. You are making necessary requirements per time and per season, and provided he's moving with you, trust me, the end is going to be glorious and you will testify and be glad that you stayed with him. Don't lose hope. Stay in God. It's going to be worth it.